Good morning. I'm Eric Johnson. I'm Executive Director for the Association of Counties. I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's really going to be fun. We are going to have 3 former county officials come on stage. They are now statewide elected officials, and it's great to see that connection between county government and state government. So we'll be introducing them here in a bit. Each one of them will take 20, 30 minutes, and we'll have a fun conversation with them. It's my honor to introduce former King County Council member and our current Washington State Attorney General, the Honorable Bob Ferguson. So, Attorney General Ferguson, come on up. Yeah, it's great to see you. Thank you. Thank you. This is great. So, I know this is going to be very hard for you to believe, but there might be some folks out here that actually don't know who you are.
Sure.
I know it's going to be hard to believe. So, I thought we'd give you a chance to kind of give your 3-minute campaign stump speech about who you are, a little bit about your background, just set the tone for how we're going to have the rest of the conversation.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Eric. Thanks to all of you. It's great to see you all. And I spent 9 years on a county council, but before that, I'm a 4th-generation Washingtonian. So my family came out to the Skagit County area near what's now Marble Mound. Yeah, I figured there's got to be someone from Skagit County here. So they were homesteaders, right? They were homesteaders out there, we think, when it was still a territory. So the family's been here a long, long time. And so I grew up here in Seattle and went to the University of Washington, and I got interested in politics. Yeah, the die-hard dog in my family. You should know we had
the WSU president speak yesterday.
Oh, is that right?
He threw down the gauntlet. It was
right?
Apple Cup victory for the
okay, I'll have to have a chat with the president, yeah. So a great client, but we'll have a disagreement on that. And so I was in private practice as a lawyer. And decided to run for the King County Council, and that was back in 2003. And so my wife and I, we've been happily married now for quite a while, and we have young children, 9-year-old twins, Jack and Katie. And last night was a big night. I read to them every night, and we just finished the Order of the Phoenix, Harry Potter's Order of the Phoenix. Last night, we finally wrapped that one up. So the kids are very excited about that. We finally got to the end of that one last night. So no, we live in North Seattle, and love working for the AG's office.
Okay, so don't be politically correct in this response,
all right.
Okay? Which one of the twins is your favorite?
Wow, that is
hard-hitting questions right off the bat.
That is tough. They are very, very different kids. So they're 9 years old now. They're in 4th grade. They're very different kids. Can't choose a favorite, but they're happy and they're healthy kids, and that's what counts. Yeah.
All right, we'll let you off with that one. So thank you very much. So what prompted you to run for the King County Council originally?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it was back in 2003. I actually I'm a Democrat. I ran against a Democrat who happened to be chair of the King County Council. She'd been on the council for 20 years, Cynthia Sullivan. She was kind of an institution. And, you know, it was a combination of reasons, I think, for anybody when they first ran for office. But it was, one was that, you know, I felt she needed a challenger. She'd been running unopposed every 4 years. And I think it's healthy in our democracy to have challenges, right? I did not think that she was as focused on the district, you know, so I had some concerns there. And then also it was combined with that I love the issues at the county level. I mean, to be honest, like I was interested in running for office at some point, but the city council didn't quite appeal to me. State legislature, I didn't want to, Olympia, that didn't work for me. I liked the county. I had a legal background. I liked the work that the counties do on law and justice issues, for example, spoke to me. Trans issues, I was interested in that. So I just liked the county issues, candidly, at that time more than other areas. And so it was a combination of things. And I was at a point in my life, I was still single. I was dating Colleen, who's now my wife at the time. And we did a lot of doorbelling. I knocked on 22,000 doors as a grassroots campaign. And Colleen and I, we still joke about it. She went doorbelling with me a lot on Friday nights and Saturdays. We called them doorbelling dates, which, you know, don't laugh. It worked. We got married. So it's right. Yeah.
No judgment.
No judgment.
Yeah,
exactly.
no judgment. So
right.
then you had actually an interesting issue is that at the time the King County Council was 13 members.
Yeah, that's right.
And they had a charter amendment to reduce it to 9.
Yeah.
And you quickly had to run right again because you got redistricted, basically. The districts got collapsed.
It was a campaign issue when I ran in 2003. I thought the county council should only be 9 members. The county had budget issues back then. I thought 13 was too large. Ironically, I was accused of being a sort of a closet Republican. That was sort of a back then.
I don't think you're called that anymore.
I'm not. That's sort of the point, right? That politics is funny that way. At the time, I was literally sort of a closet Republican for suggesting the county council should be downsized to 9. But there was a campaign issue. After I got elected, it went on the ballot. It was downsized. So what happened to me was my 4-year term that I got elected to was shortened to 2 years. My district, my colleagues eliminated my district, and I had to run again against another county council member incumbent after just 2 years on the council. So I won again, and they left me alone after that.
Yeah, he actually beat the WSAC first vice president at the time, I think, as well. So Carolyn Edmonds. So thanks. So what's the big difference? You've now 9 years on the city council. You're in your first year of your second term, so you're ending your 5th year as state attorney general. What's the big difference between coming from that county perspective and the local issues at the county wide to now seeing a broader statewide perspective, as well as just different responsibilities?
Right. So there's quite a few differences. I think a couple, the ones that struck me the most when I first became attorney general, part was just the different jobs. Suddenly you're an executive. The AG's office, we're the largest law firm in the state. We have more than 1,000 employees. We have 13 offices all around the state. In many of your counties, we have offices all around the state. So you're running a large operation that's touching every aspect of state government. On the county council, you're trying to get 4 colleagues to agree with you to get your 5 votes. As an executive, it's a very different experience. Another thing I would say is that one thing I missed maybe the most from the county council days was you're in direct communication with the public all the time on the county council. Public hearings, your meetings, the public's coming to talk about something you're working on, bus service, you name it, right? As attorney general, it's not quite that way. And so I missed that. And so I've tried to do some things to stay in touch. One thing I do is I'm trying to get to every single Rotary Club meeting in the state. There's like 187 Rotaries in the state. I've been to over 100 so far. So if you know Rotary in your county that hasn't had me and wants me to be there, let me know. I'll come on out. We're trying to get to them all. So I like that. It's a way to stay connected and take questions from folks and hear what's on their mind.
I'm sure some folks would gladly allow some of their constituent calls to come to you.
They're send them my way, yeah.
If you'd like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about lawsuits. You have been fairly active in lawsuits lately, but there are really 2 specific ones that I'd like to hear your comment on. And one deals with the opioid crisis. You were very active when you were on the council in the implementation of the 1/10 to 1% for mental health and chemical dependency and behavioral health issues. You actually, I think, even had a steering committee, which we had other folks on statewide in the implementation of that. So on September 28th, you filed a lawsuit against the pharmaceutical corporations. And so could you talk a little bit about what outcomes you would expect from that, or what's the basis for the lawsuit?
Sure. So I do have a big interest in all issues related to mental health and chemical dependency. Some of those are personal. My family, like a lot of families, grapple with these issues, and that's not by any stretch of the imagination unique. So I have an interest in the topic generally, and more specifically to the opioid epidemic. One thing I'll just mention before talking about the lawsuit, Washington, it's a real crisis, as folks in this room, I suspect, are keenly aware of. On average in Washington state, 2 people die of an opioid overdose every single day. The amount of opioids are prescribed, I think in 2012 or 2013, we had the data from a year not too long ago where there were enough opioids prescribed that year in Washington state for every man, woman, and child in our state to have a 16-day supply, right? Just to give you a sense of the scale of what's out there. And I think you have a speaker later on today who will be speaking pretty powerfully about this. And as Attorney General, we were a part of what we call a multi-state investigation with over 40 AGs, Democrats, Republicans, investigating large pharmaceutical companies that we thought were engaging in unfair and deceptive practices and marketing their drugs. Even though we were a lead on that multi-state, I pulled out of it, which is a little bit unusual, to go ahead and file our own lawsuit. It's not a criticism. I just felt we were ready to go, and it's a crisis, and let's go. So we filed a lawsuit against Purdue Pharma. They're the largest manufacturer of opioids. OxyContin, for example, is their product. To get to the essence of the lawsuit, it's complicated. It's a big lawsuit, as you might imagine. But we feel they were, as one example, deceptive in their marketing of their product. They would essentially claim that these were not particularly addictive products. You may have seen on 60 Minutes did a big show on the opioid epidemic, and in that episode, you will see a Purdue Pharma representative testifying before Congress years ago, basically saying that, oh, this isn't all that addictive. Well, that's obviously not the case. So what we hope to get out of it, number one, hold them accountable for the harm they've done. And number 2, it's my feeling that the need is tremendous out there for treatment and resources at local communities and organizations to help people who are. I met with a couple yesterday whose child has been grappling with addiction for over a decade, and they talked about the need for more treatment. And so having resources that we can put back into communities to help with that would be an example of the goal we're trying to get from this litigation.
Great.
I mean, I'll just say, look, I mean, Purdue Pharma, I mean, don't get me started on Purdue Pharma. As just one example in our lawsuit, they're of course telling doctors, hey, this stuff is not all that addictive. Doctors started having patients come back showing signs of addiction, right? And so doctors contacted Purdue Pharma saying, hey, we're seeing patients who are showing signs of addiction. What's going on? Purdue Pharma said, that's not addiction, Eric. That's what they called pseudo-addiction. That's their term, pseudo-addiction. Those folks aren't really addicted, they assured doctors. They're actually in pain. You get only one guess what Purdue Pharma told those doctors to do to treat that pain. More pills. More pills. Like I said, don't get me started. I mean, it's.
I think we did.
Yeah. So it's not right what's going on. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your leadership on that.
Yeah.
So, second lawsuit that really affects particularly the Puget Sound counties, but really has a statewide impact is what we call the culvert case, which has been going on for quite a while, which really deals with the responsibility of, in this case, the state to replace fish passage barriers, but it will have a direct impact on counties and cities. It is millions and millions, if not billions of dollars of investment that will have to be done by cities and counties, as well as the state. And we are certainly committed to salmon recovery, but there's potentially further reaching impacts of that lawsuit. You made a very difficult decision, I know, to appeal that case to the Supreme Court. And so could you give us an update on that and talk a little bit about your thinking of why you, why did you appeal that?
Sure. So very complicated case, obviously, but I'll try and keep it relatively brief and straightforward. So a number of tribes sued the state back when Gary Locke was governor and Chris Gregoire was attorney general. So litigation is going on a long time. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals recently issued a decision against the state. And the challenge for me in terms of why I appealed, and look, I work closely with tribes all around the state. I visited every single tribe in the state since I've been attorney general. They're intensely unhappy with my decision to appeal that case, to put it mildly. I understand and respect that, but I have an obligation as attorney general to the state and to the people and representing their interest. And so, yes, it would have been an easy decision not to appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court. But the implications for the state, for counties, for the residents, for taxpayers is dramatic. And if the Ninth Circuit decision, the challenge for us is, to us, it's such a broadly worded decision, okay, that if it just was about culverts and, hey, state, you've got to fix these culverts, frankly, I could probably live with that. But the reasoning would apply to, oh my gosh, I mean, developments and dams. I mean, it's incredibly broad that tribes could take that decision from the Ninth Circuit and apply it in all sorts of other contexts that we think can't be the law. And so was it a difficult decision? I mean, in a way, yes. I mean, look, I understand, politically it's a terrible decision, right? But that just can't be the analysis for me, right? It just can't be. We have to go where the law takes us. I've got to represent the people, and I think it's the right thing to do. We are trying to, we are in conversations with tribes, as we have been for many, many years before I was Attorney General, to see if we can resolve it out of court. It's not easy to do that, but we are still trying to do that. But there's a good chance. We've sought an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll know from the Supreme Court by early January whether or not they're going to take the case. If they do take the case, we'd likely be having oral arguments next year at the U.S. Supreme Court.
So you have, prolific may not be the right word, but you have not hesitated to sue the federal government, both the previous administration on Hanford issues as well as the current administration on a number of issues. I want to take you back to King County.
Yeah.
When you were King County, did you ever come to the conclusion that we should sue the state? That there are reasons that either statutorily or constitutionally the state's not fulfilling their obligations in this relationship between county government and state government? And or can you even imagine any reasons that the county should do that now?
Just for the record, I do not encourage anyone here to sue the state. I just want to be clear about that, right? I assume this is being taped or something. Do not sue the state. Whatever you do, don't do that. Call me first, right? We can work it out. I don't recall, I had 9 years on the county council. I mean, maybe I'm forgetting something even big, honestly, but I don't. I recall working with the auditor's office. The auditor's office would audit our work. I remember those sometimes
lively discussions.
I recall some of those lively discussions where I was in the room myself, right, and having those conversations. But in terms of an actual, I don't recall that happening or even coming up. I could be forgetting something, but
maybe I should have you interview Pat McCarthy later on.
I saw Pat here, right? Exactly. Yeah.
On. So, but if anything comes to mind, just let us know.
It's a deal.
We'd like to
it's
do
a deal.
that. So I want to talk about the death penalty.
Yeah.
You and former Attorney General McKenna came out, I think, last year, suggesting, and actually I think introduced legislation around, or were proponents of legislation about eliminating the state's death penalty. So could you just talk about your reasoning? Then I probably have a couple follow-up questions for that.
Sure. I mean, I've throughout my adult life been opposed to the death penalty. Now, as Attorney General, we have a role. We have a death penalty in the state, obviously, and the AG's office handles habeas appeals. So I saw John Thunheim earlier today from Thurston County. If there's a death penalty case that comes out of one of the prosecutors from your counties, when it goes through the habeas process, the AG's office is involved in handling those cases. And obviously, we still do that. My personal views don't impact our work. We follow whatever Washington state law is. But as Attorney General, I can propose changes to state law. And we proposed last year abolishing the death penalty. Was really a great deal of respect for Rob McKenna, my predecessor, a Republican who joined me at a press conference saying it was time to abolish the death penalty. Look, there are lots of reasons why I'm opposed to the death penalty. And what I find is that folks who oppose it may have different reasons. Even Rob and I have different reasons. I think I'm fairly characterizing his remarks at the press conference where he feels it doesn't work anymore. It's basically his part of it. Do I have sometimes more of a moral opposition as well? Yes. Different people, some say it's fiscally not the right approach. It costs more money to execute someone with the appeals than it is to have someone be in life in prison without parole. So folks come at it from different ways. Look, I'm from a family of 7 kids, 6 boys and 1 long-suffering sister. And so, I mean, so when we're at Thanksgiving dinner next week, but believe me, on things I work on, the death penalty, there is not agreement any more than there is in this room. But I do think that the popular opinion is changing on the death penalty, and I think we actually have a shot of getting it repealed this year or next year in the session.
So, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think what I was reading was it's about $1 million at least to try and prosecute and public defender costs, et cetera,
yes,
for a death penalty case. At the same time, I was reading an article out of, I think, Northwestern University, which said that the empirical findings suggest that the threat of the death penalty has substantial causal effect on the likelihood that a defendant accepts a plea agreement. And so it's, prosecutors have been able to utilize it. And I know the Green River murder case was a good one where they leveraged a lot of other cases because of the threat of having it available.
I think that's I was speaking to a group of prosecutors and law enforcement officials, I think last year, about the death penalty. A number of them did not agree with my views, but this issue came up. Prosecutors using it as a tool. And when my response there would be the same here, which is, in some ways, I think that's the best argument for the death penalty, candidly. Now, but one's got to be careful with that argument. Take the Green River Killer. He did not get the death penalty. The Green River Killer, right? Now there's a reason why he didn't. He gave critical information in Norm Mailing and the county, and that gave a lot of solace to victims, right, and their families. But that individual did not, the worst of the worst, truly did not get the death penalty. So it's tricky to navigate that, I would say. I guess my view is, I frankly want to engage on sort of the hardest issues. I just think that people want their elected officials to do that. I think folks should know, I'm the Attorney General, where do I stand on the death penalty, on banning assault weapons, and you name it. I just think that's important, and I don't have a problem with sharing what I think about it. People will decide, the legislature will decide, but I like putting things out there, and I feel very strongly about some of these issues, and it goes through the process.
Great. Well, thanks. I think the other one of this is that this was actually passed by the citizens in 1975. 69% to 31%. Is it time for the citizens to have a chance to vote on that versus the legislature?
No, I don't. Look, a lot of things have changed since 1975. Gay marriage, right? If you took a vote in 1975, the margin would have been even wider on gay marriage, right? So public opinion has changed dramatically on the death penalty. I have really strong views that elected officials are hired by the people and paid by the people to take tough votes. That's their job. That's my job. And the idea of always passing off to voters the hardest issues, that drives me crazy. I mean, really, just life is short. Do what you think is the right thing. Take your vote. Let your constituents know what you think, and that's politics. To me, that's politics. And I wish, frankly, more politicians were that way.
Great. So when I drafted this question, and you and I had talked a little while ago on this issue, is are we through with McCleary?
No.
I now know the answer to that, so I don't know the relevance of that question anymore.
Do I need to expand on that? Yeah, right, yeah.
But any other thoughts about it?
We just got the decision yesterday, obviously, and so we're still working our way through that. Our role is to represent the state, right? We represent the legislature, the governor. We're the law firm for the state, so you'll see it's one of our lawyers you see in court, Alan Copsey, who argues the McCleary case. So yes, I mean, we're not, we're clearly not done with it yet, and the legislature is going to have a lot more work to do with it. I mean, I think the court has acknowledged that the legislature has put in billions of dollars into the education system. That is a good thing, but they clearly want to see another billion or so right away. The legislature, I don't envy their job. That's not easy. All of you who grapple with budgets, that's not an easy thing, and so they have a challenge in front of them. It'll be our job trying to help them with that, but they're the policymakers. They have to make those decisions.
So talk to us about a headline that I read this morning. The Trump administration puts King County, Seattle, and 29 sanctuary cities on notice of no potential federal funding because of their position on federal immigrant enforcement.
Yeah, so this has been a big issue for cities and counties all across the country. A couple thoughts on that. There has been litigation. Different jurisdictions have filed lawsuits, not the state of Washington, but many jurisdictions have challenged the Trump administration saying, you can't tie, like burn grants, for example, you can't tie some of these grants to our decision whether or not to be a sanctuary city or county, however that is defined, right? There's no one definition. So far in all the lawsuits against the Trump administration on that issue, the Trump administration has lost, okay? I don't see that changing, to be honest. So I think they have a problem on the legal side of there has to be a nexus from the dollars you're withholding and the policy. That has to be quite close. That hasn't been happening so far. One thing I'll just put out there, if folks are interested, my office put out some guidance in the last year about the obligations, the responsibilities that public institutions, counties, cities, jails, have in cooperating with ICE, or what they don't have to do to provide information to ICE. If you're curious about that, it's on our website. And these are difficult issues. What might be right for one county might not be right for a different county. But our goal is put out there, here's what the law requires you to do, and here's what the law does not require you to do. And just for what it's worth, no one has challenged the legal analysis we put out there, but it's a resource for you if you're interested in that.
And your legislative agenda, some couple quick peeks into your 2018 legislative agenda, particularly as it relates to the issues that county government deals with.
Yeah, so we'll have a robust legislative agenda. We'll probably have a dozen bills. I'll just pick one issue that we haven't mentioned specifically, but it relates to the opioid epidemic, and that is in Washington State, many states have turned to having pill limits. So let's say you get your wisdom teeth taken out. If you've got a 19-year-old, I think I was 19, my wisdom teeth came out. Does your 19-year-old need a 30-day supply of pills to deal with having the wisdom teeth out? No. Many states are moving to a 7-day supply. Now look, if you have ongoing chronic pain, different situation. But to go in for something specific like that, look, if you get 30 days, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to take all those pills because your doctor gave them to you and you think, therefore, I should take them. That's not a great thing. Or number two, you take a few days worth and the rest go into a shelf in your bathroom where your kids have access to them or other folks have access to them. Also not a good thing. So I'll be proposing a pill limits proposal to legislature this next year. And if, hey, folks are interested in helping out, just let my office know. We think it's an important bill. Many states have gone to this, red states, blue states, and Washington needs to do so as well.
Here's your Pop County quiz.
My Pop County quiz, oh man.
Do you know who the only county commissioner ever, operative word, to have been elected governor?
So I knew Mike Lowry very well, but he was not a county, he was a county council.
He was a county council member.
Council member
Yes.
at King County, so not a county commissioner. So I would not know other than Mike Lowry would have been my guess.
So the correct answer, and we had a chance to talk about this, it is John Spellman. John Spellman served from 1967 to 1969 as a county commissioner prior to them becoming the first home rule charter, and he became the first county executive in the state under the first home rule charter.
And I should have known that. For what it's worth, I'm a complete, this drives my wife crazy, I'm a complete junkie of Washington state political history. I'm on literally eBay every night looking for like old campaign buttons and ribbons and stuff like that. I've got a huge collection going back to 19th century Washington state political history. So that's the kind of thing that I should know.
Yeah. Yeah. And kudos to the Secretary of State's office that did a book with
It's a great biography. Yeah.
It's a great book if you want to read it. He actually said it was the worst job he ever had being a county commissioner. So there's no one from PDC here, right? Okay, no one from PDC.
Okay.
No cameras rolling.
Sure.
Everyone always asks elected officials.
What could go wrong with this question, with that setup, right?
Everyone asks elected officials, what are you going to run for next?
They do.
Yeah. So I have to ask the obligatory question about, what's the temptation? Honestly, you're asked this every day. What's next?
there's not a whole lot to say. I just got reelected last year. I often say that I think the most consequential job in politics right now is being Attorney General. I think that. I love the work, totally committed to it. And also, we got young kids. It's a job where I can have a family life. I can read Harry Potter to my kids every night. My wife is very supportive of my work and public service in general, but she's a very, very private woman, to put it mildly. She's a very private woman. So that is most certainly a family conversation on being Attorney General has been an adjustment. Life after all the litigation with Trump, our life has been a lot less anonymous since then. She's very supportive, but that's a conversation folks would have with
the
their
most
family.
difficult question is, you're sitting at Thanksgiving Day dinner.
Yeah.
What are you most likely to go back and have seconds of?
Well, I go back and have seconds of the pie.
Pie.
My sister-in-law always makes homemade pies, and so I go back for the pie. That's easy.
That's easy.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Will you please join me in thanking the
Thanks,
Attorney
everybody.
General Ferguson?
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody.
Now that was fun. Thank you. So now it is my distinct honor to welcome former Thurston County Auditor and your Secretary of State, the Honorable Kim Wyman. So please join me in welcome Kim Wyman. You got fans.
I guess so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Whoa.
All right, whoa.
Well, we should have had like a applause meter to see which of the three got the most applause. We'll work on that for the future. That would have been fun.
Pat McCarthy following me. We already know who's going to win.
Oh,
Anyway.
yeah, that's funny. So thank you very much for joining us. We did this 2 years ago, and it was a lot of fun.
Definitely.
I'm going to start with the easy one for you. You're sitting around on Thanksgiving Day dinner, and what are you going to go back for seconds of? We're going to start easy for you.
Easy? I like easy. Either sweet potatoes with marshmallows on top, or my grandma Minnie's green Jell-O with, and I'm talking Jell-O with Dream Whip, not even whipped cream, and cheddar cheese. It's the most awesome thing. It sounds horrible, but it's awesome.
With
So,
cheddar cheese.
Yeah, cheddar cheese.
Yeah, I doubt if anyone's going to be asking for that recipe after
Yeah,
this.
anyone that wants it.
Okay.
I'm quite a cook, what can I say?
I can wait for the Secretary's cookbook coming out here. So.
Yeah, big seller.
Yeah, great,
Big seller.
great. So thank you. I think on behalf of all of us, and I promise not to tear you up, but I think on behalf of all of us, we are delighted to have you here. And we know that...
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
it's good to be seen. It's really good to be seen.
Yeah.
So mark your calendars, November 30th. I need you to pull out your most obnoxious socks and wear them and post them on Facebook. I'm going to have my hopefully last PET scan. Eric, I told you to do this last, so I wouldn't cry in front of everybody till the end. If I have a clear scan on the 30th, I'll be cured. So we're hoping.
Okay, we'll put that on the calendar.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. All right, same thing. I think most people know that you were a former county auditor. You have been Secretary of State now. You are in your first year of your second term. And so, just take us through kind of that journey, that path from being at the county as first an employee, ultimately to running for office, then ultimately to here.
Yeah, actually, it kind of goes back to before I was ever at the county. Back in the late 80s, my husband and I were living in Germany, and he was in the Army. Seriously? Okay, we'll come back to that. And LA County didn't get us a ballot in time for an election. We got it the day after the election. And it's one of those defining moments in your life that you don't recognize at the time. Didn't think much of it, nothing I could do, moved on. And then a few years later, I found myself as a Thurston County Elections Director and had that aha moment. I can make sure this doesn't happen for other voters. And so that, protecting overseas and military voters' rights, and for that matter, everyone's rights, has really been the passion that drove me to really excel in Thurston County and work with all of the county officials through the years that I was there, and then running for auditor and Secretary of State. So, I always in my stump speech, which you had asked me about earlier, I would have a point where I would talk about, my husband, U.S. Army Ranger. Okay.
They're working on the cues.
We're going to try this again.
Yeah.
So my husband, who was a U.S. Army Ranger, there we go. But you know, always fun, and military service is really important in our family. And I have a member of all 5 branches in the military. And right now, of course, as a mom, I get to brag because I am the proud mom of a 2nd lieutenant in the Marine Corps who is a JAG officer. So some of you might remember Renee Wyman running around. She's now she now has the full force of the law, so it's kind of scary.
Hopefully, I've seen you drive, so hopefully she can't prosecute there. So looking back, you know, you were reelected, I think, with 55% of the vote. It was impressive.
Thank you.
So now look back on your first term, and what went well? And if you could do a do-over, take a mulligan, what would you take a mulligan on during that first term?
Well, I think the thing I'm most proud of in the first term was stabilizing the state library's funding. Not glamorous or sexy, but when the legislature moved the state library to the Secretary of State's office in 2001, they immediately started cutting the funding. So by the time I became Secretary of State, they were literally half the size of what they were in 2001. Half the FTEs, half the budget. And it was just a group of people that were just always worrying about what they were going to have to cut next. And so to be able to stabilize that and be able to now not only do the job we need to do, but be able to think, what could we be doing? What should we be doing? How can we serve our clients better? Is just a great place to be, and it's a lot of fun. We have a new state librarian, Cindy Aiden, who is phenomenal, and we're going to be doing some really great things, and things that I really hope help local government, because we have a lot of resources that are available, and we want you all to tap into them.
Great. So talk to me about voter turnout. We are now a little over a week from a last general election. Voter turnout ranged from 75% in Garfield County.
Woohoo!
Yeah, 75% in Garfield County, to several counties, which will go nameless, that were near 25%. So talk to us a little about voter turnout, and how do we get better voter turnout, in particular at these local elections, city, counties, and I've heard you talk very articulate about the importance of these elections.
Yeah, well, of all the elections that we conduct, the local elections are the most important. And when I go out and talk to college and high school students, I remind them, I do an exercise where I show them the impact of their vote. And one of the things I talk about is how most people vote in a presidential election. Ironically, the president really doesn't affect our daily lives. Okay, maybe an asterisk now, but whatever. But really doesn't when you compare it to the people that decide the quality of the roads you drive on, the people that decide the books your kids read in school, the people that decide how fast a first responder gets to you. And those are all those local offices, school boards and city councils and mayors and fire commissioners. So the irony is we literally cede our power and our decision making to the minority of people that do show up every election. And I've been doing this for about 24 years now, and voter turnout has been the topic since I started in 1993. We have done, I'm really proud of our state because I think we've done a good job of removing barriers and doing things to keep that balance between access and security. Turnout hasn't changed. We have had 3 federal laws enacted to try to improve voter turnout and engagement. We have removed barriers like you have to find the fire station with the voter registrar, on a Sunday to register to vote, where now you can go online on your phone. So I kind of think it's not, in our state at least, I don't think it is the mechanics of it that are changing or affecting voter turnout. I really do think it is the issues that are on the ballot. When we have a hot issue, when we had trying to repeal gay marriage, we had very stellar turnout because it's a passionate issue for a lot of people. When you have a candidate that you really love or hate, it motivates you to vote. And I think really it is about quality candidates, and it is about those issues that really are important to people. That's what drives turnout. And I think it's about education. It's about getting voter pamphlets to people and getting them information. And that's really where we're going to put our focus on. Last year that was a huge topic in my other part of my life. And, so apparently the bad turnout last week was my fault, just for the record. It's a tough room, man.
Tough room, man. Yeah.
Tough room, yeah. Yeah, so anyway.
Yeah. Okay, we'll blame you.
Okay, good.
Talk about voting system and equipment. I think that's a common thing that I'm starting to hear, not just here in the state of Washington, but even nationally. I was at a meeting with 40 most populous counties, and it was an issue that he merged about this replacement of these legacy equipment, which is not that old from,
Right.
or it's making me feel very old. This was part of the Help America Vote Act. The state of Washington got somewhere near $75 million or something to put in voting systems, registration, equipment, counting equipment, et cetera. We're barely 15 years later, and we're already talking about having to replace these. So could you talk to us about why that is, and more importantly, how do counties avoid getting stuck with that bill?
Well, back in 2003, 2004, a real infusion of cash came to Washington State, and the counties in the state really benefited from it. Federal government did allocate $75 million. It was $3 billion nationwide. And it's weird, when they did that, we said, that's great, but we're going to have to replace this equipment down the road, make sure you're building that in the long haul. And oddly, Congress didn't hear us. But anyway, they have not replaced that funding. Shocking, I know. So when I first got into this office, that was one of my first priorities, because I knew what was happening in my county that I'd come from, that our systems were about 10 years old. And as we all know, a 10-year-old computer is a dinosaur. So we started with the county auditors in early 13, and election officials. We had a tech summit, and we started with a very simple question. If you knew today what you know, if you knew it in 2004, would you build the system we have? And not a single hand went up. So it was a really great unifying moment. And one of my proudest things as Secretary of State is that I got 40 independently elected officials to agree on something. And I mean that genuinely. And we have been working very hard over the last 3.5 years to identify kind of what we all are using and how they interact and what would be the ideal system. We identified 500 business needs in that system, and we put out an RFI, a request for information, last year to the business community and just said, could you even build this? And we did get responses back. We got some idea of dollars, and we got funding from the legislature to put an RFP out this year. We're currently in it, so I can't really talk too much about what the specifics are, but I think the proudest thing I have about this is that not only did we get 40 people to agree, they're really our partners in this. And our goal is to balance out that share of costs, and knowing that the counties are really cash strapped and this is important work. So we're really trying to make sure the state shoulders not only its share, but as much of the cost as we can, because it's a really state interest.
So I want to go back, because I think I let you off the hook on your mulligan. What would you do differently?
If I had something to do over again, I think the biggest difference that I noticed moving to the state was the county level. It's not political. Even though we were all partisanly elected, at least in my county, it was personal. So when you got to budget, they weren't counting the Republican auditors or cutting the Republican auditors' budget. They were cutting Kim Wyman's budget. And it was just different. It was different politics. Getting to the state, and I know this sounds odd because I've been around Olympia for more than 20 years, it's really political. Shockingly. But I mean it genuinely, because you kind of know it. You go and you testify, and you know that there's Democrats and Republicans and different points of view. But it is on a really different level. So it's not personal at all. That part makes it really easy. So you didn't go in and you do budget hearings and stuff. It's not against me. It's against the R behind my name. Or it's for me because of the R behind my name. So that part, I think, if I had understood those subtleties a little better earlier, I think we would have been more effective earlier. We're doing okay. It's always about building relationships, and certainly I learned that at the county. And it's really trying to build those relationships in this very partisan environment, and really trying to earn the trust and respect not only of the Democrats across the aisle, but within my own party. I had a number of Republican representatives and senators who didn't trust me because they thought I was just Sam Reed 2.0. And that was really, and that was something that just I didn't expect and didn't know was out there. So really had to prove that I was my own person and a different elected official than he was. So.
Yeah. Good, thank you. Hot election topics, kind of rapid pace.
Oh, God, okay.
Same-day voter registration.
Yes. That is something that has been, we've probably had 5 sessions at least on that topic, and it is really died mostly in the Senate, and I think with the 45th District, we're probably going to see a lot of these bills moving very, very fast. The Democrats I've been talking to really want it, so I think same-day registration is going to happen, meaning that people could come in on Election Day and register to vote. So right now, we're working very closely to try to make that workable and make sure the auditors are engaged in that conversation and that whatever they do put into law, that it's workable.
And you can administer it. And,
Yes.
will there be an additional cost that the state will cover when that impact?
Of course, Eric,
Yeah.
of course.
Okay.
I think, my biggest concern on Election Day registration has to do with the states they compare us to, like Minnesota, are poll site states. So it's a very different management of kind of the integrity part of that. So remember, we are mailing ballots 18 days before Election Day. We're printing ballots and things almost 30 days before. We're not, the counties are. So you have live ballots in play, and you're going to allow people to come in on Election Day and vote. It's going to require a lot of things like a real-time poll book. And how are we going to make that work? Poll book essentially at the county. So logistically, there's some mechanical things we need to work out, and I think we can.
What about prepaid postage? Is there really anything that can document that, go back to our early thing about voter turnout, is there anything that really indicates that we think it would increase voter turnout? Is there any, I know King County did a pilot, I think, but I don't know if there's much research behind that yet. But
There's certainly a lot of talk about it. We looked at the results of the pilot and have talked to some of the professors at UW-T that worked on it. And the interesting thing we noticed is that the turnout really didn't go up a lot. It went up a little, but the shift of how people return their ballots. So instead of going to a drop box, they put it in the mail. So you saw more ballots returned by mail than you did in drop boxes. And dynamic, I remember at the county, weirdest thing I've ever seen, people will drive 30 miles out of their way to avoid putting a stamp on a ballot to hit a drop box. And they're happy. They'll call and thank you for it. So, so it's just a weird thing. It really comes down to a funding issue. It's, a few $1 million each election. And depending on what the turnout is, obviously it could be higher. And so I think, the challenge, it's been talked about, have the state just pay for it every time. The challenge is local elections. When you have a school bond, in February, the state doesn't have any skin in that game. So how do you make the state pay for it and have it not be some sort of problem with the auditors, just saying.
or the budget authority.
Or whichever. Yeah.
Yes. The Voting Rights Act. Can you talk quickly about what the Voting Rights Act really entails and your perspective on it?
Well, it has certainly been a hot topic all 5 years I've been in office. It really, I think the focal issue is what happened in Yakima, the city of Yakima, where you had district in the primary elections and then general elections, or district or county or citywide in the general. And you couldn't get the representation on the city council to reflect the ethnic representation you had in the city. And that ended up going through the courts. It was very expensive. They got a remedy, and the remedy was to do a district election. So not only do the council members run by district in the primary, they run in the general. And that actually resulted in a more balanced council, and it did give the result that the court was trying to achieve. The problem is our state law doesn't allow for other jurisdictions to just do that on their own. And that's part of what's in the Voting Rights Act legislation, is to give that authority to a local government like Pasco was another city that's been dealing with this issue. Or, it could be a port district. It could be any local government district. So I think that that's a really good part of the bill. I'm worried that because you're opening up litigation, and that is really the remedy that this bill, at least the last version I saw, has in it, that you're going to open up political or litigation floodgates. The Federal Voting Rights Act has 50 years of case law and has really been defined. So if we create this new law, now you're going to have to spend a lot of time in court doing the same thing. So that's probably the thing that gives me a little bit of grief. And then the part that I really want to work with the legislature on, and I'm sure that my colleagues in the counties agree with, is there's language now to have alternative voting methods, meaning ranked choice voting, Pierce County, Pierce County? Okay, they're quiet, they're not here. They're probably counting ballots. Or instant runoff voting or proportional voting, and all these things sound great, and they are all, used in other parts of the world and some parts of the country. We don't have those here. It is going to be programming challenges for the counties to work with their vendors to even make it work. And I think we can get through those. But right now the bill is really wide open and doesn't define it. And it lets a court decide what that should be. So I'm really asking the legislators to just pick one. If you want instant runoff voting, pick it so we can define it in law and move forward. Because one, we need systems that can do it. And then two, probably my bigger concern is explaining it to a voter. All these years later after Rossi Gregoire, I still have people who don't understand how that election finished the way it did. And they ask me about it to this day. So we have trouble explaining to people how we can both look at this ballot and see two different votes, but we can at least hold it in our hand. And now you get to instant runoff voting, for example, and you go through and it's like, well, in the first round of voting, Eric won, but he didn't get 50%. So then we eliminated Chris Swanson's votes, and then Kim Wyman won. It was awesome. And don't worry, it was an algorithm. And the algorithm totally reallocated all those votes okay. And Pierce County, I was talking to Lori Gino, my elections director, when they had ranked choice voting, if they had to do a hand recount, and I'm not making this up or exaggerating, they would have had to rent the Tacoma Dome to do it. Because the way these systems work is you, as a voter, you get to vote for more than one person. You rank your votes 1 through 3, let's say. And so if your first choice gets dropped off, they go back and they count your second choice. And it sounds great, and it does actually yield kind of the minor party candidates a little bit more, but the challenge with it is how do you have people believe that those results are accurate?
So one other item that I've heard a lot of discussion about from election officials and as well as folks that have had this happen against them is the write-in. Is it too easy? Is it too difficult? Is it, do we need to correct it in statute? I've had candidates talk about it. I've heard from the auditors about
absolutely.
it. So
it's a discussion we're having. Can I just end it there? Can I just end it? It's a challenge. I mean, it's the rare circumstance where you're going to elect someone through a write-in, and of course the one, and Chris hates it when I mention this, but Linda Smith, the congressional candidate who won in a write-in campaign, unprecedented. But that was one time in probably 100 elections that I've been involved with. So it is the rare exception, but that's why our write-in law exists, is to give voters that last-minute choice and ability. But it is administratively burdensome. And trying to kind of find that sweet spot, we're still working through it. But my office is working with the auditors, and I think we can. The problem is that if we've come up with an administrative solution, oftentimes the legislature doesn't see it the way we do. So we'll keep working on it.
So election integrity. Talk to me a little bit about that. I see that there's a Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity that has generated a little bit of controversy to review voter fraud, improper registration, voter suppression. So as you're our state's chief election officer, so convince me that that either we do or don't have these problems.
All right. Can I start with my first full day back in the office was the day we received the letter from the commission? It's so awesome. Anyway, when all that stuff started hitting and the president was making claims about 3 to 5 million people who were illegal casting ballots, that's why he lost the popular vote. It literally was, we did a press conference right after all that kind of broke, and my response was it's ludicrous on its face. And at least in my state. And what I've seen through the years, for all the talk of voter fraud and voter suppression, and I always try to be very bipartisan in how I talk about both these issues, I'm really proud that our state doesn't have a history of either. We don't have a history of voter fraud that you see in some East Coast states. We don't have a history of voter suppression that you see in some southern states. And you can see that in our laws, you can see that in our political culture, you can see that in our administration of elections. So we had an opportunity at the end of 2016 to work with a project we've been part of for about 5 years called ERIC, and it's the Electronic Registration Information Center. And we are part of a 21-state consortium that is actually data matching our voter registration systems. And we protect your data. Your private data is one-way hash, so it never is seen by other states. But we have a high confidence level in the quality of the data, and we update our system, and the counties are able to update their rolls as a result. And so at the end of 2016, with all of this talk, we thought, well, we have voter history. Why don't we compare voter history with the states? So 5 states agreed to be part of this project, and we compared our data. Now, it's only 5 of 50, but it is exactly what I'd expect. Out of the 3.2 million ballots that were cast in our state in last year's election, 74 people appeared to have voted more than once. 0.002%. Now, that's not all 50 states, so I imagine it would be a little higher, but I don't think it will be disproportional, even if you add California in there. I think that that people, it's not 0, so that's a problem. 74 people had their votes canceled by somebody else, but it's not tens of thousands, it's not hundreds of thousands, it's not millions. And if we had a rampant problem, it would have been a much higher number. But it is, you know, it's people that either are trying to get away with something, and sometimes it's just people that don't know. So no, I don't think we have a voter fraud problem, and in terms of voter suppression, same thing. I think that we don't have either.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, when I ran for county commissioner, and I think a number of these folks also were, ran for office, I don't think I ever had a doubt that the system wasn't fair. And as sitting on the canvassing board, I think it even gave me more confidence in the fairness of the system. So appreciate that. So what are some of the other services? We talked a lot about elections. We had a little bit of library conversation.
Yes.
But what are the other services, other things that you want to talk about in relationship to the office?
I think probably one, if it's not already on your radar, we have a very close relationship with the counties in our archives division. We're certainly protecting the county's records and history and archiving that data for future generations and working closely with the auditors to do that. But with all of the changes in the public records, requirements of training for public records at the local level, we have been working really hard to do training, and I'm hoping all of you are aware of that, but if you're not, we are doing trainings across the state, and they are, how do you handle your email? How do you handle text messages? How do you handle the public records in your offices to make sure that you're complying with the public records law? Because none of us want to be on the wrong side of that, and it's very complex, and it is each one of our responsibilities to make sure we're complying. So that would be probably the one thing. And then I'd put a plug in again for the library. When they had a lot of budget cuts in the last 10 years or so, we had to really cut back on our services to the legislature and local governments on research. But I hope you know that the state library has just a plethora of resources available from water reports that were filed. There's state law. When any of you do any kind of anything, when you do a report or some sort of document, you have to file it with the archives and library, and we probably have it. Even if it's back in 1954, we probably have it somewhere, and I have a crack team of researchers who can find it for you. So think about us first before you go to Google.
Great. Well, Secretary Wyman, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes.
Appreciate it, and for being so open and honest with us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you too. All right.
All right, joining us next on stage, former Pierce County Auditor, former Pierce County Executive, your Washington State Honorable, the Auditor, the Honorable Pat McCarthy. So welcome. Thank you very much.
Glad to be here.
Yes, thanks for joining us. So once again, I want to hear your stump speech. When you were out there, how did you tell folks in 3 minutes who Pat McCarthy was?
It's veritably impossible for me to do it, but I try. Well, I tell a little bit about my story, and my story is that I married a young man that I met when he was in law school at the University of San Francisco, and I was in the School of Nursing, and he was from Tacoma, and after he passed the bar in California, decided he wanted to move back to Washington State to Tacoma, and I followed him up here, and the rest is kind of history for us. John and I have been married 43 years and have 4 adult children and 9 grandchildren. So we're very pleased with being able to have lived and worked and been good public servants when my kids were little. I was encouraged by the former speaker to run for school board. So that's how I started. I started on the school board, served 2 terms, 12 years on the Tacoma School Board. One of my colleagues on the board was the county auditor at the time, Kathy Pearsall-Stipik. When she wanted a deputy, she came and met with me, and I went and worked in the auditor's office, and it just kind of very serendipitous, quite frankly. My tipping point for running for county executive was former Governor Booth Gardner. He was a mentor of mine, and he said, you can do it, you need to do it, and so I did, and was elected to 2 terms. We're term limited in county government in Pierce County, and then made the decision to run for state auditor. And I will tell you, I said to a number of people, I believe in the auditing process. I believe in integrity. And as we all know, because of the leadership in the state auditor's office prior to myself entering, it was under a really dark cloud. Now, having said that, I would say that the auditors didn't necessarily, that were working in the field, really understand it from that perspective, but everyone else did. And I felt it was incumbent for me, as somebody who believes in government and believes in public service, to run for this position. I really wasn't too excited about the people that were running for state auditor, and I didn't want the last Pierce County state auditor to be indicted. So I can assure you I'm not indicted, and nor do I plan to be.
Great. So when you announced your candidacy, I was Google, wherever Secretary Wyman went. Google's a wonderful thing. You said, quote, when asked why you're seeking the position, it was first and foremost, the reason was bring some integrity back to the auditor's office. And so what did you mean about that? And 1 year later, how does that look?
Well, what I think it's important for you to know that the state auditor's office is really a part of our DNA in Washington State. This office was created in 1889. So our forefathers really believed that we needed a separately elected entity that was separate, that was objective, transparent, has integrity, to look at the coffers of local and state government. So it's been a part of our DNA. Again, there was a lot of consternation about my predecessor because he had been indicted, not for activities that he had done in the state auditor's office, but it didn't matter. It still put a dark cloud on the state auditor's office. And here's what I firmly believe. We in government, and I come out of local government, I believe in government. I believe we do more good in government than we don't. I've seen it, whether it's been on the school board, whether it's been as the county auditor, or whether it's been as the county executive. Does that mean that we don't have issues that happen, that we don't have whistleblowers or fraud or things that happen in our local jurisdictions or our state agencies? But the fact of the matter is you have this wonderful entity called the State Auditor's Office to come in, look at your book of business, and tell you where your weaknesses are, where you can make improvements. So I like to say we are the window into government, the State Auditor's Office, so we give you that opportunity to crow about what you're doing well, and things that make adjustments for how you can make improvements in your internal controls. So I think it's a great office, and I think it can provide the public's ability to respect the work that you're doing at the local level or even at the state level.
So it'd be interesting even go back to the school board, but school, county auditor, county executive, you meld those together and you look at, say, how did that help you either prepare for being the state auditor, and or what's the big difference between that? What's the contrast between being a local elected official than now being a statewide elected official?
I think it was alluded to, I don't know if it was Bob or Kim who said it, but you are closer to the public when you're at the local level. There wasn't anybody who didn't have an opinion when I was on the school board, or even today, didn't have an opinion about public education. Whether their kids went to private school, did alternative learning, whatever, everyone has an opinion because we care about our kids' education. When we had the, as Kim alluded to, the Gregoire Rossi election, and Kim and I, quite frankly, you may not know this, But we're very active in WSAC, which was the affiliate to WSAC, and for the Auditors Association, and we actually were the legislative reps. And so after that election, you can imagine the folks, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side, that were so frustrated and angry and feeling like the auditors had not done a very good job in running that election, and which was absolutely patently not the case. It was just a hair-breadth election, which is anathema to a county auditor or someone that was running elections. So Kim and I both work both sides of the aisle. So you really learn things in all of these different jobs and activities that you do. For me, in different elected positions, it was always a growth opportunity for me to grow and to learn. I've learned the book of business now. I'm on a learning curve, I should say, the book of business of the State Auditor's Office, and we do everything from soup to nuts. We're a full-service entity, and so I'm very proud of the work that's going on, and we plan to do even more.
Great. So one of the first decisions you had to do in July of this year, just 6 months in, was to increase the cost of an audit for local government from $93 an hour to $95 an hour. That comes after a 2016 increase, I think, of 5%. So could you talk to us a little bit about why we have increases? Can we look for stabilization in the future, or is this just a trend that we should tell folks to buckle up and get ready for?
Well, let me give you a few factoids. One is that there are 400 employees in the State Auditor's Office, and we're sprinkled across the state of Washington. We have a chunk in Olympia, about 120 or so, that are located in Olympia, but the rest of them are situated across the state, which is good for you. You are our clients. It's good for you because it's billable hours, so we're closer to your offices to do that body of work. But one of the complaints that I heard many times when I was on the campaign trail was retention. And the fact of the matter is, you in local government, just like I did as the county executive for Pierce County, hired a state auditor to come in and be our internal auditor. So, because you can offer more money than we can at the state level. The state legislature passed a COLA increase. The governor signed it into law. And in order to cover that COLA increase and the medical benefit increases, we had to increase the billable hours. We are still the best price you can get for someone or an entity to come in and look at your books. So having said that, we're less expensive than any firm that you would possibly hire to come in and do that body of work. And the fact of the matter is, folks, state law requires us to look at those books anyway. So even if you hired a private firm, which some do, and we allow some to do that, especially if they have a more specialized area that we may not have the certain expertise, maybe a hospital district, we still have to look at their books. We are required to do that. So the fact of the matter is we need to have these folks want to stay in the state auditors, and one way we do that is by offering them. We can't be comparable to what you offer at the local level for some of you, but with that little bump up really helps us to retain that expertise and to really get that kind of expertise you're expecting when we come in and do those audits.
Great. Talk to us a little about the Local Government Performance Center. That has been very beneficial to a number of our jurisdictions that have gone through the lean process, potentially utilizing resources from the I-900 program. You talked a little bit about that. So, what really is your 1 year in? How do you see the future of the Local Government Performance Center being, and the use of those performance audit dollars to help local governments as well as the state agencies?
You bet. I think it's one of the fabulous things that the State Auditor's Office does. In a county that I came from, Pierce County being the second largest county in the state of Washington, we had more resources than you may have in Wahkiakum, right? And so to have this center to be able to provide some additional resources as people are looking at doing these audits is a wonderful aspect of what the state auditor's office does. We may not have accessed them in Pierce County government, but many local governments have, and they come in, they will do assessments, they will work hand in glove with folks. They will help you look at things like lean and how to do performance management activities. I will tell you, when I was elected county executive in 2008, I assumed office in January of 2009. When I walked in the door, we were $13 million in the hole, and I had to make decisions immediately. And I'm not a big fan of across-the-board cuts, but the fact of the matter, we had to do a measure of that because I had to make certain cuts immediate. One of the things I did is I reached out to the state auditor's office because I-900 was passed. I knew I could get the state auditor's office to come in free of charge and do a performance audit in county government. I had 23 directors that reported directly to me. They blanched at the idea that I would ask the state auditor's office to come in and do a performance audit, but it was the best thing we ever did. Not that we had found anything that we were doing egregious, or that we found a smoking gun, or that we found that we were doing things really inappropriately, but what it did is it set the stage for us to do strategic planning, to do real performance measures, to really look at our data, and to make decisions, strategic decisions, especially budget decisions. You are challenged in local government. I know that. I was there. And so having the performance center or the local government performance folks to come in and help you, give you some ideas, give you some strategies, whether it's lean, whether it's balanced scorecard, whatever you want to do, is a wonderful asset that the state auditor's office has been providing for a number of years, and I see it growing. And one of the people that I hired recently to be my director of operations is a former county auditor, Chris Swanson, out of Cowlitz County, who will be coming in and overseeing that department. So I have great confidence that she is going to take that into another bigger and better level.
Great. Well, we appreciate it. I know a lot of our jurisdictions have taken advantage of that program, so great. So I was reading the newspaper, and it talked about your office is requesting $700,000 to pay for more accountability audits of state agencies. So what's that about? There's some backstory to that made that a headline.
Yeah. So let me give you a little bit of an education about the state auditor's office. I like to say, in a colloquial way, we do soup to nuts. We do financial audits, we do accountability audits, we do compliance audits, we do performance audits, and we've entered into the cybersecurity audit world. So we do this plethora, and it's unusual for Washington State. We are very different than most states across the country because our state auditor's office does this full range for both local and state government, from mosquito districts all the way to King County or DSHS. So we do that broad range. What has been cut over time in the state's budget, not billable hours now, so we make that clear. In the state's budget, they fund those state agencies to be able for us to come in and do their audits. And we do their financial audits, but one area that we really see that we could really be beneficial for state government agencies is for us to do more accountability audits. That's where we're looking at things that are not necessarily just their financial side of their house, but we're looking at other things. How are they following their policies? Are they following state law? An agency that may not have done some background checks for volunteers that drive buses, or things of that nature that we can find in an accountability audit that won't show itself in a financial audit. So to me, it's a modest request of state dollars to help us be able to do more accountability audits at the state level.
So we've talked a lot about audits. We talk about a little bit about local government performance center. Are there other services, programs, et cetera, that the SAO has that folks should be aware of?
Well, some of you have probably used that FIT tool that helps you kind of forecast when you're sitting there doing your budgets and knowing how do you forecast if you make these expenditures today in 2017, what will it mean in 18, 19, 20, 21? And so that FIT tool gives you some overarching ability to look at how to forecast and how to budget better. We're looking at adding to that FIT tool to drill down even a little deeper. So your sheriff says to you, well, I need 24 more boots on the ground. And then my sheriff would say, well, I need that. If you're going to, prosecutor says, if you're going to do that, I need more prosecutors. The judges say, I'm going to need more judges. So you know how it goes. You're in county government, many of you. So you know how that is as challenging at times. Competing interests, as you can imagine. And so the kinds of tools that we're looking at are to help you do that kind of forecasting so that you make smart decisions, strategic decisions, sustainable decisions. And so some of that activity, lots of training, lots and lots of training. I think you have a turnover in your staff from time to time. You have a turnover in your electeds. So providing a lot of training, working with MRSC as well, and we want to work with the associations as well. I have been doing a tremendous amount of outreach with many associations to say we want to be your colleague in providing an opportunity for the public to understand what good government is about, because we do more good in government than we don't.
Could you talk about the whistleblower line and how that
sure.
works?
We do have a whistleblower line. Now, it's a little bit different for locals versus the state. If we have a state employee that sends us a whistleblower complaint, it comes to our office and we handle that and then work hand in glove with the Attorney General's office if we need to move forward, because we have no policing authority, if you will. At the local level, your whistleblower system is handled at the local level. You do have to report to the state auditor's office, and it is an opportunity that if there is no satisfaction at the end of the day for that particular whistleblower, they have the opportunity to ask the state, and it would be the state auditor's office to do that. We also have a hotline. So your citizen may have heartburn over your fire district or your water district or your sewer district or some of the things you're doing. They have an opportunity to call our hotline, and we can do an investigation on that as well.
Great, great. So you were on the school board, which I did not know, so this is an even better question now. You were on the school board for 8 years. You were the county auditor. You were the county executive. You went through many exit
Yes, I did.
interviews with the state auditor.
Entrance and exit.
Exit. Did you ever say to that state auditor, you're just wrong? On their management letter or anything, you were just wrong.
I will tell you what I used to say. I didn't say that, but what I used to say is, who audits the auditor? That's what I used to say. Who audits him? You know, especially when Brian was there. And the fact of the matter is, we do have an internal group that actually audits our auditors. So we do have an opportunity. We have an exit or an external advisory group that an entity, a client, can go through, and if they're not satisfied with what results that we have had in a particular audit, they can take it to an external group. We've made some adjustments based on an experience that I've had since I've walked in the door, but I will tell you that we may disagree from time to time. I can't think of anything specifically, but if I, as the county executive, did I have a fraud happen in my county as county executive? Yes. Have I had whistleblowers? Yes. Have I had, I don't remember as county executive when I was sitting there ever having a finding, but that doesn't mean that they haven't happened in the past in Pierce County, of course. So I want you to do this. I would like you to embrace this process as much as you can, because it's good for us. The only thing that the public hates worse is when we hide things. And this is an opportunity for us to showcase. I like to talk about the little town of Tenino. You know, they had a turnover in their staff, they had a turnover in their electeds, and they had 5 findings. That's just huge, and they knew it. The new group that came in understood it. They embraced it. They did an eloquent response to the audit that we did, and the public, the media accepted it, the public accepted it. So when we have things that happen in our county, understanding that all of us want to do the right thing. Our budget people want to be right. But sometimes things happen, and it's better to elevate it and air it and then deal with it.
Great, great. Legislative agenda. Are there any elements that transcend into our world of county government that you can share for your 2018 legislative agenda?
Well, I will tell you this. I wanted to begin, Kim talked about relationship building, and it's so important. That's why these conferences, not to blow your horn and blow the horn of Waco and WSAC, but it's good for you to get together with each other. It's good for you. I learned so much from my colleagues in all of those different roles that I've played, and so it's really good to reach out. And I felt that the legislature did not have a really good relationship with the state auditor's office. So I've reached out to legislators. In the last session, I probably met with 50 legislators, as many as I could get during the session, both on the D and the R side, both on the Senate and the House side, to really talk about the state auditor's office, to ask them that if you do have heartburn about a county or a city or a school district or you name it, or a state agency, come and talk to us, because we want to make sure that if we're going to do a performance audit, that will be proviso that it's going to get to the heart of what you want. But that last legislative session, it was really just asking for them to not take as much money out of the performance audit dollars. The state legislature looks at the performance audit, the I-900 that generates this $40 million over the biennium, takes it and gives it to other entities because they see it as general fund. We're arguing that no, it really was intended for performance auditing. And we want that money back into our systems. Because quite frankly, for us to come in and do a cybersecurity audit for you or to do a performance audit for you, we want those dollars to pay for that, so you're not having to have that burden. In this session, it's going to be a little more challenging because it's a short session. We know what the state Supreme Court has just done with regards to McCleary, so that's going to really pressure the legislature to be refocused on McCleary. They spent a lot of energy on McCleary, and just on that note, I will tell you that the new Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reichtel, the new superintendent, and I actually met with both the leadership of the House and the Senate, Republican and Democrat, in the last session to say, here's what we want from you. Whatever you decide with McCleary, make sure there's clarity, because my auditors are going to go in and audit these school districts, all 295, and they are worried about whether they use local levy dollars or they use basic ed dollars and what they're using it for. So for us to be hand in glove, for the state auditor and the superintendent of public instruction say, whatever you decide, make it clear, because it's the vagueness that will cause a local school district, one local school district to spend money what we may think is inappropriate compared to another school district. So clarity was of the essence. So anyways, good. But this session, we have just some cleanup language and that request for the supplemental, 700,000 supplemental budget request.
Great. Well, let's talk turkey. White meat or dark meat?
White.
If you're going back for seconds, what is it going to be? And it better not be green
God.
Jello with
really?
Cool Whip
Kim
and
still here?
cheddar cheese on. It
Seriously.
just cannot be that.
Oh my God, that's like in a retirement home. Don't they say that? Chuck? My God, Kim. Well, I do like dressing, but I will tell you that my youngest daughter and her husband, they make the best pea salad. You know, one of those layered pea salads. It's really, really good. So we all covet that, and we force them to make it every holiday. So
Great.
That would be seconds.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It's been
My
delightful. Thank you very much. It was great. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. I don't know about you, but I think we have a lot to be proud of with these three folks. Will you please join me and give them another hand? Yeah, really good. Delightful.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction, Eric, and obviously the video, I think, does a good job of at least explaining to you some of the things that your National Association of County does for you each and every day back in Washington, D.C. I want to start off by saying thank you for the hospitality here. I had a chance to be up here last week with our National Association of Counties Financial Service Corporation and had a chance to talk with Eric and Ken at that time. And I have a sister that lives here, so it's always a good excuse for me to come back up to Seattle. You know, I want to start off by specifically thanking your state association and the folks that are representing you on the NACO Board of Directors. That includes County Commissioner Blair Brady, who I know is in the audience here, and County Commissioner Ken Dahlstead. They do a great job representing you back on the Board of Directors at NACO, and of course, Eric Johnson is just a delight to work with. He does such a great job for you here at a state association, but he also is a tremendous resource back for us back in Washington, D.C. with the other county executives. You know, it was just about 2 years ago, I was encouraged by some of my colleagues to consider putting my name in for the second vice president's position at NACO, and I was getting some encouragement from my state association, and I was really kind of debating because it's a lot of time commitment, a lot of traveling around. I'm gone just about every week somewhere. And I remember talking with one of our county associates, who's the director of intergovernmental affairs, and he was really trying to convince me I should run for this position. And I was going, well, you know, why do you think I should run for this? And he says, and it's something that really made me stop and think. He said, because it'll really look good in your obituary. So I thought, yeah, I'm probably at the point in my life and career where I'm no longer fluffing up my resume, but I'm focusing on what comes next. Well, I'm very proud of the fact that here in Washington State, you have 37 of your 39 counties that are a member of our National Association of Counties. And I don't want to call anybody out, but I certainly look forward maybe having the opportunity to talk to the folks from Mason and Adams County this afternoon to convince them to come on board. You do have great representation. I have to tell you, I was amazed to look at, there's over 60 county commissioners that are involved in our various committees at NACO, and we really do appreciate it because it makes us a lot stronger. Obviously, there's a lot of issues going on back in Washington, D.C., and we're facing a lot of challenges back there. I'd like to think maybe there's also some opportunities in there. But the federal policy agenda that is being brought forth now is packed with issues that will have a very direct effect on counties. The president's policy priorities and the efforts on Capitol Hill are going to affect counties and our residents in big ways. We're concerned that the proposed budget could shift a lot of costs to counties and to other local government levels, especially for safety net services that our citizens absolutely depend upon. On the other hand, we're really pleased to see the opportunities that we have, and it was referenced in the video, to look at maybe regulatory reform. And there's been some things that have happened there with the waters of the United States that gives us an opportunity to maybe go back and rewrite some of the rules and policies that affect us on a regular basis. Our nation is facing, obviously, major challenges. Poverty, jobs, health care, infrastructure needs, the opioid crisis, and basic local government services that we have to look to the federal government as a partner. And unfortunately, that hasn't always been the case. We're committed to continuing to work with the administration and Congress. We have to do that so that we can communicate the potential impacts on any legislative efforts at the federal level that it's going to have on our counties and our ability to deliver the services to the residents that live in all 3,069 counties across the United States. Just very briefly, we're going to be talking about tax reform. We're going to be talking about health care reform. We're going to be talking about transportation and infrastructure needs. We're going to be focusing on behavioral health in the criminal justice system and the strong consultation in the federal regulatory process. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of those today, but through hard work with folks like you, going back to Washington, D.C., representing your counties, representing your state, and certainly representing the needs of your local constituents, we can and we will make a difference. Let me just talk briefly about tax reform. I was just told by Brian Namey, who is here. Brian, why don't you stand up so they can see you? He's the Director of Communications for NACO. Give him a round of applause. He's been here the last couple of days. That the House just approved about an hour and a half ago, H.R. 1, which is a tax reform bill, by a vote of 227 to 205. That's one issue that certainly has been in the news a lot over the last couple of weeks, and it's one where NACO has been advocating back in Washington to preserve the federal deductibility of state and local taxes, or as it's referred to as SALT. It's a lot easier to say SALT than state and local taxes. NACO helped to launch a very broad-based bipartisan coalition of individuals, which is called the Americans Against Double Taxation. And not only does this coalition include state and local government groups, but it includes schools and superintendents. It includes the National Association of Realtors, sheriffs, firefighters. It's a very broad-based group that are all working to try to preserve the state and local tax deduction. Eliminating SALT would generate more than $1 trillion in additional revenue to the federal government. By the same token, it means that there'd be $1 trillion less money for residents to have spent for local projects and local issues of concern. And it's one of those issues that frankly cuts across every city, every county, every special district, every school district throughout the state of Washington and the United States. This is a $1 trillion federal money grab, and it's certainly making it difficult for local government to meet our community's needs. Preserving the SALT deduction is a matter of keeping the tax code simple. 1913, there was only 6 deductions. State and local taxes was one of them, under the theory you shouldn't have to pay a tax on a tax. Now, there's other issues in this bill that was just passed by the House. Private activity bonds would be severely restricted. Your ability to go back and advance repurchase bonds to cut down on the interest rates is going to be precluded, and it is certainly something that we all have to continue to work on at the Senate level when this gets to them. We think that there's some opportunities maybe to get some changes that would preserve the private activity bonds and certainly preserve the SALT deductions. I'd like to also briefly mention that this year's NACO presidential initiative, you saw pictures of Roy Charles Brooks from Tarrant County. His initiative this year is serving the underserved. And with that thought in mind, everyone in this room knows the critical role that counties play in breaking the multi-generational cycles of poverty, especially through our criminal justice system. A large percentage of our jail population comes from incarcerating those suffering from mental health issues and substance abuse disorders. The Serving the Underserved initiative builds on NACO's Stepping Up campaign to reduce the number of people with mental health illnesses in jails and our efforts to combat the opioid epidemic. And I'm very proud to say that there's 13 of your counties here in the state of Washington that are a part of that Stepping Up initiative. If you'd like more information on that, you can get on the NACO website, which is naco.org/poverty, to view NACO's new publication, which is called Serving the Underserved Counties Addressing Poverty. And I think we have some copies of that out in the lobby also, which outlines the local response to poverty that our federal policy priorities are going to be focusing on this year. Also, I just want to comment on the fact that one of the things that NACO does at the national level is to really focus on the whole issue of PILT, property in lieu of taxes, and SRS, secure rural schools. That's an issue that NACO is the only national association that is advocating for those programs. Both of them are coming up probably at the end of the year when the federal government deals with the budget. And is that a big deal? Well, yeah, in the state of Washington in 2017, Washington counties received $21.3 million in PILT payments. And in the case of secure rural schools, Washington counties in 2015, which is the last year that there was actually funding coming through, received $17.3 million. So that's an issue that all 39 counties in the state of Washington should be focusing on, and we should be working together to make sure that both of those programs are reauthorized this next year. Finally, I just want to say that you've got a great delegation of people that work on NACO committees. As I mentioned, there's over 60. We can always use more. We love to have more involvement, and it's easy for you to get involved at the federal level. All you have to do is just check with your state director, Eric Johnson, and tell him of your interests. There's about 50 different committees and task forces that exist. We need your involvement. We need your support. And I sincerely thank you for the opportunity to say a few words this morning. And thank you very much for the invitation and the hospitality you've already provided. Thank you.